The wind screamed across the frozen wasteland of Frosthaven like a living thing made of ice and fury. Jiwoo pressed her gloved hand against the reinforced window of the forward research outpost, watching the white death consume everything beyond the glass. She had seen storms before during her 3 years on this ice world, but nothing like this. The weather system said it would last at least 4 days, maybe longer. Behind her, the outpost hummed with the sound of straining generators. The facility was small, built to house maybe 20 people comfortably. Right now, there were 12 souls inside, a mixture of humans and aliens who worked together to study the unique ecosystem of this frozen planet. Jiwoo was the chief medical officer, though that title meant more than it sounded. She was doctor, veterinarian, and emergency surgeon all rolled into one. When you were posted on the edge of known space, you learned to handle whatever came through your door. She turned away from the window and walked back to the medical bay, her boots clicking softly on the metal floor. The bay was clean and organized exactly how she liked it. Medical supplies lined the walls in clearly labeled containers. Her surgical tools sat sterilized and ready in their trays. The examination table in the center of the room gleamed under the bright lights. Everything had its place. Everything made sense here. That sense of order shattered when the alarm blared through the outpost. Jiwoo's heart jumped. She ran toward the main entrance, already pulling on her thermal coat. Other staff members emerged from their rooms, confused and concerned. Hyun, her closest friend and the outpost's communications officer, was already at the control panel by the door. "What is it?" Jiwoo called out. Hyun's face was pale. "Something's outside. Something big. It's trying to get in." The exterior cameras showed only white chaos, but the motion sensors were going crazy. Jiwoo made a decision. "Open the outer door. Just enough for whatever it is to get through." "Are you insane?" someone shouted. "The storm will kill us all. Something out there is dying right now," Jiwoo said firmly. "Open it." Hyun hesitated for only a moment, then hit the controls. The outer door cracked open and the storm rushed in with a sound like thunder. Snow and ice blasted through the opening. Then something huge pushed through the gap and the door slammed shut behind it. The creature collapsed on the floor of the entrance chamber. It was massive, easily 3 meters tall even lying down. Thick fur covered its body, gray and white like the storm itself. The head was wolf-like but larger, with intelligent eyes that glowed a pale blue. Its limbs were powerful, built for running across ice and tearing through prey. A Vakran, one of the predator species that called this sector of space home. But this Vakran was female and she was pregnant. Very pregnant. And something was terribly wrong. Jiwoo moved without thinking. She dropped to her knees beside the creature, her medical training taking over. The Vakran's breathing was rapid and shallow. Blood stained the fur around her hindquarters. Her body shook with contractions that came too fast, too hard. "Get me a stretcher," Jiwoo ordered. "Now, we need to move her to the medical bay." "She's Vakran," someone protested. "We're not equipped for that. We need to call for their medical teams." "Communications are down," Hyun said quietly. "The storm is blocking everything. We're completely cut off." The Vakran's eyes found Jiwoo. There was pain in those eyes, but also something else. Desperation, understanding. The creature knew she was dying. She knew her cubs were dying. She was asking for help in the only way she could. Jiwoo met that gaze and nodded. "I'll try. I promise I'll try." It took 6 people to move the Vakran onto the stretcher and then into the medical bay. She was incredibly heavy, all muscle and dense bone. Once they had her on the reinforced examination table, Jiwoo sent everyone else out except for Hana, another human doctor who worked in the research labs. "I need you to help me," Jiwoo said. "I can't do this alone." Hana nodded, her expression nervous but determined. "Tell me what to do." Jiwoo pulled up everything the outpost computer had on Vakran physiology. It wasn't much. The Vakran were notoriously private about their medical information. They didn't trust other species with their biological secrets. What Jiwoo did know was that Vakran mothers usually carried litters of 3 to 5 cubs. The pregnancy lasted about 7 months. Birth was supposed to be relatively quick, assisted by specialized Vakran midwives who understood the process. This Vakran was in crisis. Her cubs were coming early and they were coming wrong. Jiwoo scrubbed her hands and pulled on surgical gloves. "What's your name?" she asked the Vakran gently. The creature's mouth moved. The sound that came out was like rocks grinding together. But Jiwoo's translator implant caught the meaning. "Iska," Iska, I'm Jiwoo. I'm going to help you and your cubs. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Iska's eyes closed briefly, then opened again. A nod, barely visible. The next 18 hours blurred together into a nightmare of blood and exhaustion. The first cub was stuck in the birth canal, its position all wrong. Jiwoo had to reach inside Iska with her entire arm, feeling blindly for the tiny body, trying to turn it without causing damage. When the cub finally emerged, it wasn't breathing. Jiwoo worked on it for 10 minutes, clearing its airway, stimulating its heart, refusing to give up. When it finally gasped and whimpered, she nearly cried with relief. The second and third cubs came easier, but they were so small. Too small. Premature by at least a month, Jiwoo guessed. She placed them in the outpost's incubators, devices meant for growing tissue samples but now repurposed to keep the tiny cubs warm and alive. The fourth cub nearly killed Iska. Something was wrong with the placenta, causing massive internal bleeding. Jiwoo had to operate, cutting into Iska's abdomen with hands that shook from exhaustion. Hana held lights and handed her instruments, both women working in silence, broken only by the sound of labored breathing and the howl of the storm outside. 8 hours into the ordeal, the power flickered. Then it died. Emergency lights kicked in, bathing everything in red. The incubators went silent. The temperature in the medical bay began to drop immediately. No, Jiwoo whispered. She ran to the incubators and pulled the 3 cubs out. They were cold to the touch, their tiny hearts beating too slowly. She looked around desperately, then made a decision. She unzipped her thermal jacket and placed the cubs against her bare skin, 2 against her chest and 1 against her belly. Then she zipped the jacket back up, trapping them with her body heat. Hana, I need you to finish the surgery, Jiwoo said. I'll walk you through it. For the next 3 hours, Jiwoo stood beside the examination table with 3 dying cubs pressed against her skin, directing Hana's hands as they sutured and sealed and saved Iska's life. She could feel the cubs moving weakly against her. She talked to them constantly, begging them to hold on, promising them everything would be okay. The power came back on when the surgery was nearly complete. Jiwoo's legs were shaking so badly she could barely stand. Her vision swam with dark spots. But Iska was breathing steadily now, and when Jiwoo finally pulled the cubs out and checked them, all 3 were alive and stronger. The fourth cub, the one that had caused all the trouble, was the weakest. She kept it against her skin for another hour, even after the incubators were running again. Only when she was absolutely certain it would survive did she finally allow herself to place it with its siblings. Iska woke briefly as dawn light started to filter through the storm outside. Her glowing eyes found Jiwoo, who sat slumped in a chair beside the examination table, too exhausted to move. Your cubs are alive, Jiwoo said softly. All 4 of them. They're going to make it. Iska made a sound, low and rumbling. The translator couldn't capture it, but Jiwoo understood anyway. It was gratitude, relief, something that might have been a promise. Then Iska closed her eyes and slept. Her massive body finally relaxed. Jiwoo sat in the red-tinged darkness of the medical bay, listening to the storm outside and the gentle breathing of 5 Vakran lives she had saved. She didn't know it yet, but she had just changed everything. For herself, for this outpost, for the entire sector of space. Some acts of compassion echo across light years. Some choices reshape the universe. This was one of them. The storm broke on the 3rd day. Jiwoo stood in the medical bay, checking on Iska and the cubs for what must have been the 100th time. She hadn't slept more than a few hours since that first terrible night. Every time she tried to rest, her mind insisted she needed to check on her patients one more time. Make sure they were still breathing, still alive. Iska was recovering well, all things considered. The massive Vakran female could sit up now, though she moved slowly and carefully. The cubs nursed hungrily, their tiny bodies already growing stronger. They made small chirping sounds that seemed impossibly cute, coming from creatures that would one day grow into apex predators. Hyun found Jiwoo staring at the cubs with exhausted but satisfied eyes. You should sleep, he said gently. I'll watch them for a while. Soon, Jiwoo promised, though they both knew it was a lie. The sound of ships approaching made everyone in the outpost go still. Large ships by the sound of the engines. Military grade. Hyun rushed to the control room while Jiwoo stayed with Iska, one hand resting on the Vakran's massive shoulder in a gesture meant to be reassuring. 3 Vakran warships settled onto the ice outside the outpost. The lead ship was larger than the others, painted in patterns that meant something in Vakran culture that Jiwoo didn't understand. The ships were sleek and dangerous looking, built for speed and combat. Seeing them up close made Jiwoo's stomach tighten with anxiety. The airlock cycled. Heavy footsteps echoed through the outpost. Then he appeared in the doorway of the medical bay, and Jiwoo forgot how to breathe. The Vakran male was enormous, even larger than Iska. His fur was darker, almost black except for silver markings around his face and shoulders. His eyes glowed like blue fire. He wore armor across his chest and arms, marked with symbols of rank and authority. Power radiated from him like heat from a star. This was someone important, someone dangerous. His gaze swept the medical bay, taking in everything in an instant. Iska lying on the examination table, the 4 cubs in their incubators. Jiwoo standing between him and her patients, small and human and utterly outmatched but refusing to move. The male's eyes locked onto Jiwoo. The air in the room seemed to grow heavier. Who saved them? His voice was deep, translated into words Jiwoo could understand but carrying undertones of something primal and fierce. I did, Jiwoo said. Her voice only shook a little. I'm the medical officer here. The male stared at her for a long moment. Then he moved, crossing the room in 3 swift strides. Jiwoo forced herself not to flinch as he stopped just inches away, towering over her. His head lowered and she realized with shock that he was smelling her, taking in her scent. You are human, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. You saved my sister and her cubs. Jiwoo's eyes widened. Iska is your sister? Yes. He turned to look at Iska, his expression softening in a way that made him suddenly seem less terrifying and more real. I am Tae Yang, Alpha of the Stormfang Pack. We received Iska's distress call before the storm hit. Her hunting party was caught in an avalanche. She was the only survivor. His voice grew rough. I thought I had lost her. Lost them all. Iska made a sound from the examination table. Tae Yang went to her immediately, and Jiwoo watched as the 2 Vakran touched foreheads in what was clearly a gesture of deep affection. They spoke in their own language, too fast for the translator to catch. But Jiwoo saw Iska gesture toward her several times, saw the way Tae Yang's eyes kept returning to look at the human doctor. After several minutes, Tae Yang straightened and turned back to Jiwoo. Iska says you worked through the night to save her, that you held the cubs against your own skin when the power failed, that you nearly collapsed from exhaustion but refused to stop until all of them were safe. Jiwoo shrugged, uncomfortable with the intensity of his stare. It's my job. I'm a doctor. No, Tae Yang said firmly. It was not your job. Vakran physiology is not your specialty. You were not equipped or trained for this. You had every reason to refuse, to say it was impossible. But you tried anyway, and you succeeded. He moved closer again, and this time Jiwoo did step back. Not from fear exactly, but from the overwhelming presence of him. Tae Yang noticed and stopped, seeming to make himself smaller somehow. Less threatening. In Vakran culture, he said carefully, there is a sacred bond called Kasashara. It forms when someone saves the life of a pack member's young. The one who saves the cubs becomes pack bonded, entitled to the protection and resources of that pack for the rest of their life. Jiwoo blinked. I don't understand. You saved not just 1 cub, but 4. And you saved Iska as well. The debt cannot be measured. Tae Yang placed his right hand over his chest over the armor that protected his heart. I, Tae Yang, Alpha of the Stormfang Pack, declare Kasashara bond with the human called Jiwoo. She is pack. She is protected. Any who harm her will face my teeth and claws. This I swear by blood and ice. The declaration sent a shockwave through the outpost. Within an hour, every member of the facility knew what had happened. Within 2 hours, the news had spread beyond the outpost to the other settlements on Frost Haven. By evening, it had reached the orbital stations and the diplomatic channels. Hyun found Jiwoo in her quarters, sitting on her bed and staring at the wall. Do you understand what you've done? He asked, his voice worried. I saved a life, Jiwoo said. 4 lives, actually, 5. You created a political incident. Hyun sat beside her. The Vakran don't make pack bonds with other species. Ever. They barely tolerate most of us. For an alpha to declare Kasashara with a human, that's unprecedented. The other factions are going to lose their minds. I didn't ask for this, Jiwoo said tiredly. I know, but it's done now. And Vakran bonds are permanent. You're tied to that pack for life. Jiwoo thought about Tae Yang's blue eyes the way he had looked at her with such intensity. Is that really so bad? Before Hyun could answer, alarms blared again. They rushed to the control room to find chaos. A Sarkesh diplomatic ship had arrived without clearance or warning. The Sarkesh were another predator species, reptilian and cold-blooded, known for their political scheming and their territorial disputes with the Vakran. A Sarkesh official appeared on the communication screen. His scales were dark green and his eyes were flat and emotionless. We demand the immediate transfer of the human known as Jiwoo to our custody for questioning regarding treaty violations. Tae Yang's voice cut through the channel like a blade. Denied. This is not your decision, Vakran. The human violated coalition protocols by treating your species without proper authorization. She must answer for this. She saved lives. There is no violation. That is for the coalition to decide. Surrender the human or face sanctions. Tae Yang appeared in the control room, moving so silently that Jiwoo jumped when she saw him. He had been inside the outpost the whole time, unwilling to leave. Now he positioned himself between Jiwoo and the communication screen, a wall of fur and muscle and barely controlled rage. Listen carefully, Sarkesh, Tae Yang said, his voice dangerously quiet. Jiwoo is under my protection. She carries my pack bond. If you want her, you will have to go through me, and through every warrior in the Stormfang pack, and through every Vakran who hears of this insult to our most sacred tradition. The Sarkesh official's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Calculation, concern. You would risk war over one human. I would risk everything. Tae Yang's lips pulled back, showing teeth that could tear through armor. Test me and find out. The transmission cut off. For a moment, the control room was completely silent. Then Hyon whispered, What have we gotten ourselves into? Jiwoo looked at Tae Yang, at the rigid line of his shoulders and the protective way he stood in front of her. She thought about Iska and the 4 tiny cubs that were alive because she hadn't given up. She thought about the oath Tae Yang had made, the weight of it, the permanence. I don't know, she admitted, but I guess we'll find out together. Tae Yang glanced back at her, and for just a moment his fierce expression softened. Together, he agreed. That is what pack means. Outside, the storm might have ended, but Jiwoo had the feeling that an even bigger storm was just beginning. And this time she wasn't facing it alone. The Galactic Coalition arrived 5 days later with 3 ships and a delegation of officials who looked like they would rather be anywhere else. Jiwoo sat in the outpost's main conference room, flanked by Tae Yang on one side and Hyun on the other. Across the table sat representatives from 5 different species, including a Sarkesh diplomat named Vek, who watched her with cold, unblinking eyes. The human coalition representative, a tired-looking woman named Ambassador Park, opened the proceedings. We're here to address the complaint filed by the Sarkesh delegation regarding Dr. Jiwoo's treatment of the Vakran citizen Iska and her offspring. There is no complaint to address, Tae Yang said flatly. Jiwoo saved lives. End of discussion. If only it were that simple, Ambassador Park sighed. She pulled up a holographic display showing lines of text. Coalition medical protocol requires that treatment across species lines be approved by certified xenobiologists and done in proper facilities. The Forward Research Outpost is not certified for Vakran medical procedures, so I was supposed to let them die while I waited for paperwork. Jiwoo asked, unable to keep the anger from her voice. The protocols exist for good reason, Vek interjected smoothly. Unauthorized medical treatment can lead to complications, misunderstandings, even accusations of experimentation. I wasn't experimenting. I was saving lives, so you claim. Vek's tongue flicked out briefly. But you cannot deny that you acted outside your authority, that you made decisions that should have been left to Vakran medical professionals. There were no Vakran medical professionals, Tae Yang growled. The storm had cut off all communications. If Jiwoo had not acted, my sister and all 4 cubs would have died. Do you understand that, Sarkesh? They would be dead. And that would have been tragic, Vek said with false sympathy. But it would not have created this political complication. You see, Alpha Tae Yang, by declaring Kasa Shara bond with this human, you have elevated her to a position of significant influence within your pack structure. The Stormfang pack controls 3 star systems and has considerable military strength. With Iska's bloodline restored through her cubs, your political power in this sector increases dramatically. Suddenly, Jiwoo understood. This wasn't about medical protocols at all. It was about power, politics, the endless game that species played with each other across the galaxy. You wanted Iska's bloodline to end, she said quietly. You wanted Taeyang's pack weakened. Vec's expression didn't change, but several other delegates shifted uncomfortably. Ambassador Park closed her eyes briefly as if in pain. That is a serious accusation, Vec said. Is it true? Taeyang's voice was dangerous. What I want is irrelevant, Vec replied. The fact remains that this human violated coalition law. She must face consequences. The debate raged for hours. Jiwoo defended her actions, explaining the medical crisis in detail. Taeyang invoked Vakran pack law, citing centuries of tradition. The coalition delegates argued among themselves, clearly divided. Some seemed sympathetic to Jiwoo. Others sided with Vec, whether from genuine concern about protocols or political calculation. Jiwoo couldn't tell. Finally, as the second day of hearings drew to a close, Vec played his final card. If the Vakran will not be reasonable, then the coalition must act. I propose that Dr. Jiwoo be detained pending a full investigation. She will be held in coalition custody, not Sarkesh or Vakran, where she can be questioned properly. No, Taeyang said. You don't have a choice in this matter, Alpha. Taeyang stood slowly. He was easily the largest being in the room, and when he drew himself to his full height, he seemed to fill all the space. I, Taeyang, Alpha of the Stormfang Pack, make this declaration. Jiwoo is under my personal protection. She has earned pack bond through courage and compassion. If any being attempts to take her against her will, it will be considered an act of war against the Stormfang Pack and all allied Vakran clans. The room went silent. Ambassador Park looked like she wanted to sink through the floor. Several delegates started talking at once, voices rising in panic. You cannot threaten war over one individual, Vec hissed. It is not a threat. It is a promise. Taeyang placed his hand on Jiwoo's shoulder, the gesture both protective and possessive. This human risked everything to save my family. She asked for nothing in return. She expected no reward. She did it because it was right, because she saw living beings in danger and could not turn away. That is worth protecting. That is worth fighting for. Ambassador Park held up her hands. Everyone calm down. Let's take a recess. We'll reconvene tomorrow and try to find a solution that doesn't involve interstellar war. As the delegates filed out, Vec paused beside Jiwoo's chair. You should have let them die, human. It would have been easier for everyone. Before Jiwoo could respond, Taeyang was between them, moving with shocking speed. Say that again, he invited softly. Vec retreated quickly and the room cleared. Jiwoo found herself alone with Taeyang in the conference room. She slumped in her chair, exhausted by the day's proceedings. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause all this trouble. You caused no trouble. You saved lives. Taeyang sat beside her, his massive frame somehow fitting into the chair designed for smaller species. Tell me something. Why did you try so hard? You knew the odds were against you. You could have sent Iska away, said it was beyond your capability. No one would have blamed you. Jiwoo was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice soft. When I was 15, my family was in an accident. A ship malfunctioned during a transport. My mother was injured badly. The nearest medical facility said they couldn't treat humans properly. They said we should wait for a specialized team. We waited. She died while we waited. Taeyang made a low sound of sympathy. I became a doctor because of that, because I never wanted anyone else to die while people made excuses about protocols and procedures. Jiwoo looked up at him. When Iska came through that door, I saw my mother. I saw everyone who ever died because someone didn't try hard enough. I couldn't let that happen again. I couldn't. Your mother would be proud of you, Taeyang said gently. I hope so. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Taeyang asked, Are you afraid? Of what might happen? Terrified, Jiwoo admitted. I've never been important enough to start a war over before. You will not fight alone. That is what pack means. Your burdens are my burdens. Your enemies are my enemies. That seems like a lot to promise to someone you barely know. Taeyang looked at her with those glowing blue eyes. I know that you fought for 18 hours to save my sister. I know that you held premature cubs against your own body to keep them alive. I know that you collapsed from exhaustion. but still would not give up. What else do I need to know? Jiwoo felt something warm bloom in her chest. It wasn't romantic exactly, though maybe it could become that someday. It was deeper than that. It was recognition, belonging, the feeling of being seen and valued for who you really were. Thank you, she whispered. No. Thank you. Taeyang stood. Come, you should rest. Tomorrow will be difficult. But tomorrow never came, at least not the way they expected. Jiwoo was in her quarters trying unsuccessfully to sleep when the alarm sounded. Not the normal alarm, the emergency alert that meant immediate danger. She grabbed her clothes and ran for the control room. Hyun was already there, his face pale in the glow of the displays. Someone's trying to breach the outpost. Multiple entry points. Professional work, Sarkesh? Jiwoo asked. Probably. They're not waiting for the coalition to make a decision. Taeyang appeared flanked by 2 Vakran warriors. Stay behind us, he ordered Jiwoo. The attackers came through the secondary airlock moving fast and professional. They wore unmarked combat gear, but their movements gave them away as Sarkesh. 6 of them, armed with stun weapons. They were trying to take Jiwoo alive. They didn't account for Taeyang. Jiwoo had seen Vakran before, had worked with them, but she had never seen one fight. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Taeyang moved like liquid death, faster than something his size should be able to move. His claws tore through armor. His jaws closed on weapons and crushed them. In less than a minute, all 6 attackers were down, but one had gotten a shot off. Taeyang stood in the center of the corridor, and Jiwoo saw the burn mark across his shoulder where an energy blast had grazed him. It was bleeding. You're hurt, she said, moving toward him. It's nothing. It's not nothing. Let me look at it. She treated his wound in the medical bay, her hand steady despite the adrenaline still flooding her system. The burn wasn't deep, but it had to hurt. Taeyang sat still while she worked, watching her with an unreadable expression. You threw yourself in front of that shot, Jiwoo said quietly. It was meant for me. Yes, why? Because your life matters more than mine. Jiwoo's hands stopped moving. That's not true. It is. Taeyang caught her hand gently in his much larger one. You save lives, Jiwoo. You create hope. You make the universe better simply by existing in it. I am a warrior. I am good at fighting and killing. But you are good at healing and saving. The galaxy needs more of you and less of me. I disagree, Jiwoo said firmly. The galaxy needs people who protect the healers so they can do their work. It needs warriors who fight for the right reasons. Like you. Taeyang was quiet for a long moment. The summons arrived 3 days after the attack. A formal invitation, though everyone knew it was more of a command. The Stormfang Pack Council wanted to meet Jiwoo, wanted to see for themselves the human who had earned their alpha's protection and caused such upheaval in the political landscape. Jiwoo stood in her quarters, staring at the message on her datapad. Her hands were shaking slightly. I don't think I can do this, she told Hyun, who sat on her bed looking worried. You saved 4 cubs and their mother, Hyun reminded her. You've already done the impossible once. That was medicine. I know medicine. I don't know Vakran politics or culture or how to act around their council. Then be yourself. That's who earned Taeyang's respect in the first place. The journey to the Vakran settlement took 6 hours by shuttle. Taeyang piloted personally, with Jiwoo and Hyun in the passenger compartment. Through the viewport, Jiwoo watched the ice plains of Frost Haven give way to mountain ranges carved from glaciers. The settlement appeared gradually, a massive structure built into the mountains themselves, with towers of ice and stone that caught the light and threw it back in shades of blue and silver. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. The landing platform was enormous, designed for Vakran vessels and bodies. As they disembarked, Jiwoo felt tiny, like a child in a world built for giants. Vakran moved around them, going about their business. Most stopped to stare at the human walking beside their alpha. Some faces showed curiosity. Others showed clear hostility. Stay close, Taeyang murmured, and do not show fear. Vakran respect courage. The council chamber was deep inside the mountain, a circular room with a high ceiling supported by pillars of carved ice. Seats arranged in a semicircle faced a central platform. Vakran filled those seats, dozens of them, all adults, all warriors and leaders. The combined weight of their attention pressed down on Jiwoo like a physical force. An elderly female Vakran sat in the central seat, her fur gray with age, but her eyes still sharp. Taeyang bowed his head to her respectfully. "Elder Risa," he said, "I bring Jiwoo, the human who saved Iska and her cubs." Risa studied Jiwoo with an intensity that made her want to hide behind Taeyang. But she forced herself to stand straight to meet that gaze without flinching. "You are small," Risa observed. Her voice was raspy with age, but still strong. "Yes, Elder," Jiwoo replied. "Humans are smaller than Vakran. Yet you saved cubs that would have killed you if they had panicked during birth. Iska tells me one kicked you so hard you had bruises for days. It wasn't the cub's fault. She was scared." A male Vakran stood from his seat. He was almost as large as Taeyang, with darker fur and a scar across his muzzle. "I am Bora, second of the Stormfang pack. I speak for those who question this human's place among us." Taeyang's posture shifted slightly, becoming more defensive. Bora continued, "You claim Kasashara bond with this creature, but she is not Vakran. She does not understand our ways. She brings political trouble to our doorstep. The Sarkesh are already using her presence as an excuse to challenge our territorial claims. How is one human worth all this chaos?" "She saved 4 cubs," Taeyang said firmly. "That makes her worth everything." 4 cubs that would not have been in danger if Iska had not been foolish enough to hunt during storm season, Bora countered. "Should we reward this human for fixing a problem that should not have existed?" "The cubs are innocent," Jiwoo said, her voice carrying across the chamber. All eyes turned to her. Whatever mistakes Iska made, the cubs didn't deserve to die for them. "No child deserves that. Children?" Bora laughed, the sound harsh. "They are cubs, human. They are not your species. You are not their mother. You are nothing to them but a strange creature who happened to be there." Something hot flared in Jiwoo's chest. "I held them against my skin when they were dying. I felt their hearts beating. I breathed life into the one who wouldn't breathe on her own. I stayed awake for 18 hours straight making sure they survived. Don't tell me I'm nothing to them." The chamber went very quiet. Bora's eyes narrowed. "You dare speak with such passion to me, human?" "I dare speak the truth. Those cubs are alive because I refuse to give up on them. If that offends you, I'm sorry. But I won't apologize for saving lives." For a long moment, Bora stared at her. Then he turned to Taeyang. "Your human has spirit. I will give her that. But spirit alone does not make her pack. I challenge your judgment, Alpha. If you truly believe she deserves Kasashara bond, then defend that belief. In the arena. Now." The chamber erupted into noise. Vakran voices raised in argument, some supporting Bora, others opposing him. Taeyang stood perfectly still, his face unreadable. "You invoke formal challenge?" he asked quietly. "I do." "Then I accept." Taeyang looked at Jiwoo. "Do not worry. This will be resolved." But Jiwoo was very worried. She watched as the council and many pack members moved to a different chamber, one that was circular and open to the sky. It was an arena, she realized. A place for combat. The floor was marked with old stains that might have been blood. Hyun grabbed her arm. "This is insane. They're going to fight over you." "I know," Jiwoo whispered. "I should stop this." "You can't. It's their way." The fight began without ceremony. Bora and Taeyang circled each other, both stripped of armor, relying on claws and teeth and strength. When they collided, the sound echoed off the ice walls like thunder. Jiwoo had seen Taeyang fight the Sarkesh attackers, but this was different. This was ritualized, governed by rules she didn't understand. Both warriors drew blood. Both landed terrible blows. Taeyang was faster, but Bora was cunning, using techniques that spoke of long experience. The fight lasted 20 minutes that felt like hours. Jiwoo's hands were clenched so tight her nails drew blood from her palms. She wanted to look away but couldn't. Finally, Taeyang got past Bora's guard and pinned him to the arena floor, teeth at his throat. Bora went still. "I yield." Taeyang released him and stepped back. Both warriors were bleeding from multiple wounds, breathing hard. But Taeyang stood tall, his eyes finding Jiwoo in the crowd. "The challenge is answered," Elder Risa declared. "Taeyang has defended his judgment. The Kasashara bond stands." But Bora's voice cut through the chamber. "The bond may stand, but I'm not alone in my doubts. Many question whether a human can truly be pack." Jiwoo stepped forward before she could think better of it. "Then let me speak. Let me address these doubts." Taeyang looked alarmed, but Risa nodded. "Speak, human." Jiwoo walked to the center of the arena, her small form dwarfed by the space and the watching Vakran. I don't understand all your traditions. I don't know your history or your laws, but I understand what it means to protect those who can't protect themselves. I understand what it means to fight for someone else's life as hard as you'd fight for your own. She turned slowly, trying to meet the eyes of as many Vakran as she could. You call yourselves pack. You say that means loyalty, protection, family. But family isn't just about being the same species. It's about choosing to stand together. About refusing to abandon each other when things get hard. Iska was dying. Her cubs were dying. I could have turned her away. I could have said it wasn't my problem. But that's not who I am. And I think if your pack is what Tai Yang says it is, that's not who you are either. She paused, gathering her courage. I'm not asking to be Vakran. I'm just asking to be allowed to care about your people. To help when I can. To be the kind of person who doesn't look away when someone needs help, no matter what species they are. Silence followed her words. Then from the edge of the arena she heard small sounds. Chirping. The 4 cubs pushed through the crowd of adult Vakran, moving unsteadily on legs still learning to work properly. They came straight to Jiwoo, and before anyone could stop them, they were rubbing against her legs, marking her with their scent. It was instinctive, Jiwoo realized. Cubs imprinting on someone they recognized as safe. As family, Iska appeared, walking slowly but steady. She stood beside her cubs and looked at Jiwoo with those glowing eyes. Then she bowed her head, a gesture of deep respect. The cubs have chosen, Risa said, her voice carrying the weight of ages. They recognize the one who saved them. Who are we to deny what even younglings can see clearly? Slowly, other Vakran began to make sounds of agreement. Not all of them. Some still looked hostile, still doubtful, but enough that Jiwoo felt the tension in the chamber shift. Taiyang came to stand beside her, ignoring the blood that still dripped from his wounds. The cubs know truth, he said. Jiwoo is pack, my pack. Anyone who questions that questions me. Bora stood, wincing from his injuries. He approached Jiwoo and she forced herself not to step back. He studied her for a long moment, then did something unexpected. He placed his hand over his heart in the same gesture Taiyang had used when declaring Kasashara. I questioned your worth, Bora said, but I see now that you have something we Vakran sometimes forget in our pride. You have compassion without limit, courage without hesitation. Perhaps that is something the pack needs. He looked at Taiyang. Your alpha chose well. Jiwoo felt tears sting her eyes. Thank you. The council dissolved into smaller groups, Vakran discussing what had happened. Some approached Jiwoo with cautious curiosity, asking questions about human medicine and culture. Others kept their distance, but the open hostility had faded. The warning came 2 weeks after Jiwoo's acceptance by the Pack Council. She was in the settlement's medical wing, teaching a young Vakran named Day about human anatomy, when alarms began to sound throughout the compound. Not emergency alarms. War alarms. Taiyang appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. The Sarkesh fleet has entered the system. They claim we violated coalition territory agreements. They're demanding the immediate surrender of Frost Haven and all Vakran settlements. Jiwoo felt her blood run cold. This is because of me. Because of the Kasashara bond. This is because the Sarkesh want our territory, and they're using you as an excuse. Taiyang moved into the room, his presence somehow making the space feel safer, even as he delivered terrible news. They've been looking for a reason to challenge us for years. You just gave them the opening they wanted. Then I'll surrender myself. I'll go to them and explain everything. Maybe if I'm not here anymore, they'll back down. No. The word was flat, absolute. You are Pack. We do not surrender Pack members to enemies. Even if it means war? Especially then. Within hours, the settlement transformed into a military fortress. Warriors emerged from training grounds, armor gleaming, weapons sharp. Ships that Jiwoo had thought were transport vessels revealed hidden weapons arrays. The peaceful settlement she had come to know showed its teeth. Jiwoo and several other medical personnel set up emergency treatment stations throughout the settlement. She worked alongside Vakran medics now, their initial suspicion replaced by grudging respect after she had proven herself capable. Hana arrived from the outpost along with Hyun and other humans who refused to evacuate. We're in this together, Hana said simply when Jiwoo tried to send them to safety. You're not facing this alone. The Sarkesh fleet approached slowly, deliberately. 12 warships against the 4 Vakran vessels that defended Frost Haven. The numbers weren't good. But Taeyang seemed calm, almost confident as he coordinated defensive positions. What do you know that I don't? Jiwoo asked him during a brief moment of quiet. The Sarkesh are good at scheming but poor at actual combat. They rely on overwhelming force and intimidation. His eyes glowed with an inner fire. But Vakran do not intimidate easily, and we fight better when defending our own. The storm came that night as if the planet itself was preparing for battle. Snow and ice whipped through the air, reducing visibility to almost nothing. Perfect conditions for the Sarkesh to make their move. They landed ground forces under cover of the storm, targeting multiple sites simultaneously. The medical station where Jiwoo worked was in a fortified section of the settlement, protected by thick walls and defensive systems. But nothing was impenetrable. The attack came just before dawn. Explosions rocked the settlement. Warning klaxons blared. Jiwoo looked up from the medical supplies she was organizing to see Hyan burst through the door. They've breached the outer defenses. Sarkesh soldiers are pushing toward the civilian sections. They're targeting the nursery areas where the cubs were kept, where Iska's 4 younglings lived. Jiwoo didn't hesitate. She grabbed a medical kit and ran toward the nursery section. Behind her, she heard Hana shouting for her to wait, to let the warriors handle it. But those were her cubs, the ones she had saved, the ones who had marked her as family. She wasn't going to let them die now. The nursery was in chaos when she arrived. Young Vakran of all ages huddled together while adult caretakers tried to move them to safer locations. But the corridor leading to the evacuation route was blocked by rubble from an explosion. Smoke filled the air, making everyone cough and wheeze. Jiwoo assessed the situation with the practiced eye of someone who had dealt with emergencies for years. The rubble could be cleared, but not quickly enough. The Sarkesh would reach them first. They needed another way out. The ventilation shafts, she said to the nearest caretaker. Can the cubs fit through them? Yes, but they're too scared to go alone. They'll panic. Then I'll go first. I'll lead them through. It was insane. The shafts were barely large enough for her to squeeze through, designed for air circulation and emergency access. But Jiwoo climbed into the nearest opening and called to the cubs in a voice she fought to keep steady. The 4 cubs she had saved came first, recognizing her voice. They followed her into the shaft, chirping anxiously. Then others came, tiny bodies pressing close, looking to her for guidance. Jiwoo crawled through the darkness, the metal cold against her hands, her breathing harsh in the confined space. Behind her, the sounds of fighting grew louder. They emerged in a storage area on the far side of the settlement. Jiwoo helped each cub down, counting them frantically. 23, all present, all alive, run to the deep shelters, she told them. Go! They scattered, instinct driving them to safety. Jiwoo turned to go back, to help more evacuees, and found herself facing a Sarkesh soldier in the corridor. He was massive, scaled and armed, his weapon trained on her. You're the human, the one causing all this trouble. I'm a doctor, Jiwoo said, raising her hands. I'm unarmed. Doesn't matter. You're valuable. You're coming with us. He reached for her, but Jiwoo had spent years learning how different species moved and fought. The Sarkesh were strong, but their joints were vulnerable. She dropped low, sweeping his legs, and ran. She made it 3 corridors before he caught up with her. This time there was no escape. The Sarkesh grabbed her by the throat and slammed her against the wall hard enough to make her vision blur. Stupid human. You should have surrendered when you had the chance. Then he was ripped away from her, thrown across the corridor like a toy. Taeyang stood between them, and Jiwoo had never seen him so angry. He was fury incarnate, a force of nature in Vakran form. You dare touch my pack, Taeyang snarled. The fight was brutal and brief. The Sarkesh soldier was skilled, but Taeyang was defending something precious. When it was over, Taeyang turned to Jiwoo, blood on his claws, and his expression softened. Are you hurt? No, scared but not hurt. She touched her throat gingerly. It would bruise. The cubs are safe. I got them out. Of course you did. There was pride in his voice and something else, something deeper. The battle raged for 6 more hours. Jiwoo treated wounded warriors as they were brought to the medical stations, working until her hands shook from exhaustion. Vakran, human, even some of the other species from the outpost who had joined the fight. She helped them all. The turning point came when Vek, the Sarkesh diplomat who had caused so much trouble, was captured trying to reach the command center. With their political leader exposed and in custody, the Sarkesh forces lost cohesion. Evidence found in Vek's communications revealed that he had fabricated the treaty violations, that the entire conflict was based on lies and territorial greed. The coalition fleet arrived shortly after, finally moving to enforce peace. The Sarkesh were forced to withdraw, their reputation damaged and their aggressive expansion halted. In the aftermath, Jiwoo stood on a platform overlooking the settlement. Dawn was breaking, turning the ice mountains golden pink. The storm had passed, leaving the world clean and new. Taiyang joined her, his injuries bandaged but his spirit unbroken. You saved the cubs again. During the battle, when everyone else was fighting, you made sure they reached safety. They're my responsibility, Jiwoo said simply. No. They are our responsibility. That's what you've taught me. Taiyang was quiet for a moment. When the Sarkesh grabbed you, I felt something I've never felt before. Pure terror. The thought of losing you was worse than the thought of losing the entire settlement. Jiwoo looked at him in surprise. Taiyang, you carried my family through the blizzard when death hunted them. You refused to give up even when the odds were impossible. You stood before the Pack Council and spoke truth even though you were terrified. You risked your life to save cubs during a battle. You are the strongest person I know, Jiwoo, and I am honored to protect you. To stand beside you. I couldn't do any of it without you, Jiwoo said softly. Without the pack. Without this family that accepted me even when I didn't fit. You fit perfectly. You always did. We were just too proud to see it at first. The 4 cubs that started everything bounded up to the platform, followed by Iska. They were growing quickly now, already showing the promise of the powerful Vakran they would become. They pressed close to Jiwoo and she ran her hands through their soft fur, marveling at how much they had grown. They need names, Iska said. It is tradition for the one who saved them to choose. Me? Jiwoo was honored and terrified. Yes, you gave them life. You should give them names. Jiwoo looked at each cub thinking about the night she had saved them. The first who had been stuck and not breathing. The second and third who had been so small. The fourth who had caused so much trouble but had fought so hard to live. Bum, she said, touching the first. It means spring, for new beginnings, Dohae for the second. It means courage, Nari, for the third. It means lily for beauty and strength. Hanol, for the fourth. It means sky for reaching higher than anyone thought possible. Iska bowed her head in approval. The cubs chirped their acceptance, already responding to their new names.